Hello and welcome to the Quincy Access Television studios. I'm Mark Crosby. Thank you so much for joining me and my guest. My guest is Caitlin Kirby. She is a public health nurse in the city of Quincy. Caitlin, welcome back.
Yes, thank you for having me as always.
Pleasure as always. This topic came from you. You actually had a power outage at your house and thought that folks should know what to do when they lose power. Specifically to the show, we are looking at winter storm preparation.
Yes.
Very important, and very important for your health.
Yes, when we think of safety for storms, and specifically winter storms, as you just mentioned, I had my light power went out only briefly, luckily, but I realized as a public health nurse, I did not know where my flashlights were. So when we talk about preparation, it's good and great, but you have to make sure you do prep. So I just thought as we're going into this winter season and we're starting to see on the forecast these storms coming our way, it's good to kind of just re-jog our minds of tips and to get through safely.
Right, because people might say, okay, it makes sense. Snow, lifting heavy snow could cause a heart attack. That is a possibility. Yes. But you and I were talking also, and we'll get to it in just a moment, about medications and how important it is if you do need to go to a shelter for any reason and you don't take those medications that you need to take daily, and how important that is.
Yeah, and anything, because these winter storms, they can shut down a region. They can take out our power. So you really want to make sure, like something like a medication, you might not have access to a pharmacy during these storms. So
Absolutely.
You really want to make sure you are prepared ahead of time and not last minute frantic looking for help.
Because nothing goes well when you're frantic.
Yes, yes.
Let's look at the overview. We will start with why prepare for winter storms. Preparing before the storm, home and your vehicle. Staying safe during the storm. Driving in winter storms. Protecting your pets. Preventing hypothermia, what to do. And preventing frostbite, what to do for that as well. And lastly, we will talk about resources. So, why prepare for a winter storm?
Yeah, so a winter storm, so you would think it would just be a snowstorm, but a winter storm is classified, it can include large snow accumulation, extreme cold temperatures, coastal flooding, beach erosion, and heavy wet snow or ice. These conditions, again, can shut down an entire region and lead to roof collapses, communication disruptions, and power outages. And winter storms are associated with storm-related deaths caused by automobile accidents because, of course, our roads are very unstable during storms. Heart attacks due to overexertion, especially if you think of people trying to shovel themselves out. Freezing to death, and also carbon monoxide incidents are really a risk.
Right, because a lot of folks will run generators during a power outage and not vent that generator correctly.
Yeah, so you'll really want to see when you're getting ready for these storms, you want to look at the equipment you have. If you do have a generator, make sure you're following the instructions properly. And making sure everything's up to date and charged and ready to go.
So we will talk now about preparing before a storm. And I just want to bring back the incident that you mentioned, losing power and not knowing where those flashlights were. Mm-hmm. Now, you weren't anticipating a power outage, and a lot of times they happen without anticipation. So it really is important to prepare. Yeah,
so like a power outage, that can happen at any time of the year. So you really want to make sure, again, even what I ended up doing is I put a little basket by my front door and I put my flashlights, my batteries, anything I thought that during a power outage that I might need to grab in a pinch. So it's good to put those things accessible. But when we're talking about these winter storms, you want to make sure you're staying informed and receiving alerts, warnings, and public safety information.
And we, of course, know here in the city of Quincy, they do have set up an alert system.
Yeah, so our city has an alert system. The National Weather Service also has an alert system. I know a lot of times today with our mobile devices, those automatically will get national alert. So it's making sure that you keep an eye on those. And if you don't know how to, you could always ask your phone provider to say, like, how do I get these weather updates? But I know, like, you could download the weather app and just make sure you're checking that. You want to create and maintain a family emergency plan. So that's specific for yourself and your home, your family. So you want to determine what the needs are of your home. So for example, if you are somebody who receives dialysis, medical treatments, or home health services, if you know a storm's coming up and you may be losing power for a couple days, it doesn't hurt to check in with your provider and see what you should do if you can't make that. For example, like dialysis, they might be able to get an emergency ride to and from if needed. So make sure you have a plan and you're not thinking of it last minute. You're getting in touch before it happens. And also, you want to make sure you're assembling emergency kits. And I'll go into for the cars as well. It's good to have an emergency kit in your car. But you want to make sure that you have water. And you want to think 1 gallon per person per day. And you want to try to stock for at least 3 days. So water, food, you want to think like ready to eat meals, something that you don't have to prep for, you don't need electricity for.
And you can find those meals, those packets online and in many stores.
Yes, and there's a lot of options out there. Even canned goods are good to have. You want to make sure you have a can opener on hand.
Very good. Right.
So it's these little things that you might stock up a bunch of cans to prepare, but then you forget the can opener. So it's just making sure. You might want to put a list together and be like, this is what I want to put together. So those foods, you want to make sure it's things you like, and also, like, again, look at your home. Do you need baby food? Do you need pet food? Do you need medication for your children or your pets? Like that sort of thing. Prepare ahead of time. Your tools and supplies. So again, that could be your can opener, a manual can opener, a battery powered or hand crank radio or flashlight. I have a little lantern at home, which worked out great for my power outage. So again, it's good to have, and for years, I'll collect this stuff, and then it's all around the house in different areas. And when the power is out, you don't want to be running around your house. You want to be able to quickly pull those out.
So you had mentioned earlier that you now have a basket.
A basket, yes, and extra batteries. Always doesn't hurt to put those in there. Even think if you had hearing aids, you want to make sure you have extra batteries for hearing aids. So any of your medical supplies, assess what you truly need for that.
So glasses also.
Glasses, yes. Dentures. For your pets, you would need their collars, their leash, food, bowls. Especially, you want to pack, like if you did have to leave your home, God forbid if a tree falls down and hits your roof and you and your family have to leave.
Right.
You want to make sure that you have stuff together where you could just grab your dog leash, grab your dog bag, and walk out the door. That also goes with documents. You want to make sure, like if you do have to leave to go to a shelter, you want to make sure you have your insurance card with you, your ID if you may need that, and medical information. And then other items, maybe a first aid kit, waterproof matches, a lighter. And again, look at your home, because like, for example, right now I would need diapers, I would need wipes, I would need all that stuff
That's
for my
right.
daughter as well.
Yeah. Waterproof matches. I guess I never really thought about that.
Yeah, so it's good to, and I always like to have like a lighter and matches. Just in case you run out of one, you always have an option.
And I know most folks don't carry money, but money, or at least ATM cards, I suppose. I mean, if there's a power outage, you won't be able to use an ATM machine.
No, you won't be able to use an ATM. And hopefully, God forbid, if you had to leave for a shelter, hopefully you won't be needing cash there. But again, doesn't hurt to have on hand just to have a little extra money if you needed it.
We're going to look specifically at the home and vehicles.
Yeah, so this is kind of overall maintenance for a home that you want to look at year round, but specifically as we head towards these winter months, making sure you're weatherproofing your home. So for example, like taking off your hose outside so it doesn't freeze and sealing that to protect your pipes from the cold water.
Right, because your pipes could burst and then turn your home into an uninhabitable space.
Yes, yes. I go into that a little when we go into during the storm, but even if it's really cold out, you want to make sure you have your water on just slightly. You don't want it running out crazy, but you just want to have it running just a little drip to keep the water flowing through the pipes. But we do also want to say annual chimney and flue inspections and cleanings. Those are really important because you don't want to just light a fire if you don't know what that chimney looks like or if it hasn't been inspected. That should be done every year.
Because there are buildup,
Yes.
potentially buildup on the bricks.
There can be buildup and there can be animals can go in there as well. So you really want to make sure that it is properly vented so that way when you light a fire, it vents properly and you don't fill your home with carbon monoxide and smoke.
Which we should mention is obviously a deadly gas. It is also a gas that you can't detect through smell.
Yeah, so there's no smell to it. So that is why our next thing on the list is smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors, especially during the winter when you have your heat running. If you did have something like a generator, make sure it's properly vented. And follow those directions, but carbon monoxide is silent, and a lot of times if you don't have it detected, you can just fall asleep and then you wouldn't wake up. So very important, and that's actually something we as working for a local board of health, when we go out on home inspections, we make sure that the smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors are on and active to keep the people safe.
I know we've heard in the past about people who had passed because they started their car in a garage.
Yes.
And again, the gas not being detected, well, I guess in those cases, not being detected by a monitor, ended up killing the
Yes.
inhabitants of the house.
Yeah, so it's very scary, and you want to think too, like if you have small pets at home or small children, they might be affected quicker by that just because they're so small, close to the ground.
Sure.
So really make sure you have those, they're working and they're plugged in.
And that's also a yearly check on those
Yes.
batteries
Yes,
and the systems themselves.
You want to make sure that they're all up and active. And a lot of times the good thing with those is they're pretty, like if they are running low, they'll normally beep to let you know that like batteries need to be changed.
Sure.
But make sure you are keeping an eye on those. And then you want to think for your vehicle. So when I got married, my dad said to my husband, the vehicle's on you now, all the like yearly maintenance of it. Because I forget about some of the things I find, but make sure, and this is
You have
what
a child now, so you're distracted.
Oh, I have a child on board, so I'm making sure I'm up to date on all of this. You want to keep up to date on your maintenance checks. Make sure your radiator system's working well. Refill the windshield fluid. I find that almost every winter when like you start getting the salt on your windshield and you can't see out. For some reason, I feel like it always happens on the highway. So make sure that windshield fluid's filled.
And also, with that said, they do sell windshield washer fluid that doesn't freeze, and
Yes.
that's the kind you should be using, especially during the winter.
Yes, the antifreeze. And you want to, anything with antifreeze, that can have like a sweet taste to it that attracts animals. So make sure if you do have that, you're keeping it away from children and animals in your home. And another thing for your car, check those tires and the threads and the air pressure. Because with the cold weather, the air pressure can go down a little bit. And also keep that gas tank near full. You don't, especially in the winter when temperatures are dropping so low, you want to make sure you have a good amount of gas. Like never let it get all the way to empty
Right.
for your car.
And I assume it's worth saying, throw some extra, I suppose, clothes items into your car.
Yes.
You may need that if for some reason you break down. You obviously have no heat, so you could potentially bundle up with what you have
Yes.
left in the back.
Yes, and I go in further slides. I do go through driving in the winter storm, so I do go through like the emergency kit for that car and a couple extra things that would be good to have.
Let's talk about staying safe during a storm.
Yeah, so during the storm, you want to make sure you're minimizing your outdoor activity as best as possible, especially for our children and our elderly, our immunosuppressed. They may be more likely to getting really sick from the cold, so like that hypothermia, they might affect them quicker. So make sure if you are going out, you're bundled up appropriately. Heat your home safely, so again, that proper ventilation and placement of your generator. Make sure you're fully reading those instructions and using it properly. Lighting your home, avoid fire hazards. You really don't want to be lighting candles all around the house because again, if that tips over, then you have a fire.
And
on
I'm also
top of it.
thinking, well, right, but I'm also thinking, didn't mean to interrupt, but hoarding is an issue with some folks. And if the house doesn't have clear paths,
Yes.
and you are experiencing an outage or any kind of emergency, that's detrimental.
It definitely can be, and especially in some cases, if if they don't have that clear ventilation, if they have things blocked with objects, it's very much we recommend, if God forbid, if you do find you are in a hoarded home, lighting candles would not be smart because if that house goes up in flames, objects light up really quickly. And also, with hoarding, it can be hard for first responders to get into you if those pathways are not clear for them to get in to rescue you. So I know we've done an episode on hoarding, but especially in the winter during these storms, that's an added layer of risk to those individuals.
And I don't think that folks equate hoarding to health. I really don't think sometimes they don't see that connection, but there is a connection.
There is a connection, and definitely depending on the level of hoarding, like of course, we have objects in our house, clutter can add up pretty quickly. But when it gets to a point, especially if it becomes unsanitary, we, as a health department, we look for like the state sanitary code. There has to be clear pathways to all exits of the home. And again, that's all for emergency reasons. So first responders can get to you to save you if they have to.
Conserve heat.
Yeah, so conserving heat. So you want to make sure your windows are closed and sealed properly. You want to make sure you're not like if you did open a window, you want to make sure you're not leaving it open all night long, that sort of stuff.
Or doors and drafts.
Yes, blocking the bottom of the door. It's very important to conserve it because if your power is out and you don't have a generator, your home will lose that heat pretty quickly.
Water. We talked about water.
We talked about our water. Yeah, leaving the water running just slightly to prevent the pipes from freezing.
And also, I mean, if you have nothing else in your house at the time, water is important to store there as well as in your car.
Yes, yes.
If you store it in your car, it could freeze.
It could freeze, yes. And as now that you're getting into the car, we'll get into our driving during the storm.
How is that for a transition?
Yes. So we typically want to avoid, especially in any winter emergency, we are advised not to drive. So you really want to avoid it unless it's absolutely necessary. If you must drive, you want to avoid driving during the worst parts of the storm. So keep an eye on that on those alerts. If possible, only travel during daylight hours. Don't travel alone, or if you have to go alone, make sure somebody knows where you're going and where you'll be. And stay on main roads instead of taking shortcuts. Consider public transportation if that's available. Clear the snow and ice from your windows, the hood, the roof of your car. A lot of times people miss that roof and then you're driving and all the snow is hitting the people behind them. Leave plenty of room for stopping. And even with this research, the speed limits, those are for dry roads. So even though the speed limit might be 30, you want to go slower to make sure your car can stop appropriately. And then know the current road conditions. So if you dial 511 from your cell phone or any landline, you will be able to get weather, like the road conditions in your area. So that's helpful to have. And then those emergency kits. So everything, so that water, food, that extra hats, blankets are all great. But for your car, you might also want like a windshield scraper, an extra shovel and salt for the ice, hazard reflectors, a bright colored flag if you did have to pull off and it's very white out with a snowstorm.
Sure.
And then emergency flares, if you did have those, always good to have in your car.
Pets, how do you protect your pets?
Yeah, so I'm a big dog lover.
I do.
So we always think of our pets. So the exposure to winter's dry, cold air and chilly rain, sleet and snow can cause chapped paws, itchy, flaking skin, and that can cause a lot of discomfort for your pets. So you want to make sure, keep your pets indoors whenever possible. I do know there are some breeds out there, like a husky, like they like to be out in the winter storm. But if you do have a pet who's outdoors, make sure that they have shelter big enough that they could lay down and get their body heat to stay warm. You also want to make sure it's off the ground a little so they're not laying in water by any means. Protecting their paws. So sometimes you'll see people walking around, their dogs have little boots on,
Right.
which seems silly. My dog won't wear it, but it does prevent, because the salt that's being thrown, that can irritate and harm their paws.
Sure.
So if your dog doesn't want to wear boots like my dog, when you bring them in from the storm, like a nice warm cloth with water, make sure you're wiping their paws down. Don't lock them in a car ever, because just as the summer where it gets really hot, it gets really cold in the car. And again, we mentioned that antifreeze. It can have a sweet taste that can attract animals, so make sure it is out of reach, locked away.
Let's now talk about conditions, hypothermia.
Yeah, so our last two, so these are two conditions. So our hypothermia, so this is caused by prolonged exposure to very cold temperatures, and your body loses heat faster than it can be produced. So they can have altered ability to think clearly and move well. So for adults, you might see they have shivering, exhaustion, confusion, fumbling hands, memory loss, and slurred speech. In infants, they might be bright red, have cold skin, and low energy. So what we do, it's a medical emergency. You dial 911 right away. And I will say, you would want to dial 911 regardless, whether you knew it was hypothermia or not. Because if somebody's having confusion and slurred speech in front of you, you don't know if they're having a stroke. You don't know what's going on.
Sure.
So call 911 right away. If that medical care is not available, move the individual to somewhere warm. Remove wet clothing. Warm the center of the person's body with a warm blanket. Have them drink warm fluids if possible. And then for severe hypothermia, you would move to the dry area, call 911, and actually start CPR if they're not breathing at that point.
And another condition, frostbite.
Frostbite. So frostbite is an injury caused by freezing that can lead to a loss of feeling or and color in the affected areas. So a lot of times we'll see this on people's nose, their ears, cheeks, chin, fingers, and toes. So we'll see redness or pain in the area, white or grayish skin. Skin will feel firm or waxy, and a lot of times there'll be numbness. So a lot of times it'll be another person seeing this rather than themselves. So what you do, you seek medical evaluation. So if immediate medical assessment is not available, get the person to a warm place as soon as possible. Do not walk on frostbit toes or feet. And you do not want to rub or massage the area because it can increase damage to like the nerves in that area. You want to put those affected areas in warm water or use body heat.
Not hot.
Not hot. So yes, that's something, because if you think of that, if you have scorching hot water and your hand's numb, you're just going to burn your hand.
You're not feeling.
Yeah, so you want it to be nice and warm. Body heat's also really good, so like putting your hands on your armpits is a good way to like keep your fingers warm. Do not use a heating pad, a heat lamp, radiator, or fire, because again, where those areas are numb, they're susceptible for burning. So for both instances, depending on how severe frostbite is, you would want to, if you can't get there during the storm, you would want to go seek emergency care after the fact to make sure it's assessed.
And of course, don't stick your tongue on a frozen pole.
Yes, yes.
Christmas Story.
A Christmas Story. It's my dad's favorite movie.
Yeah.
But yes, you always think of that scene where the little boy licks the pole and his tongue gets stuck.
Because it can.
Yes.
Your skin, anything wet, if your fingers are wet, it's cold, and the pole is obviously cold.
Yes.
It does stick, and you can pull, if you pull, you're pulling skin.
Yes. So maybe put an advisory out to your children that is real and do not do that.
That is real.
In that movie.
For more information on winter safety resources.
Yeah, so the information I found today was on the Massachusetts Department of Public Health website, so mass.gov. FEMA also had a lot of information available. In each topic, I know I threw a lot of topics in here, but each topic, like specifically your car, your pets, you could go more in depth for all of those. And even in my office, we have a little booklet for emergency preparedness for seniors, and it's a little book with checklists. So when in doubt, if you don't know where to start, you can call your local Board of Health and just say, I'm looking for this. Do you have any resources? And I'd be happy to provide like an emergency checklist if you needed that.
Great. Some people would benefit from
Yes.
that. I would benefit from that.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for the information today. Certainly, as you had said, a lot of information, all very relevant.
Yes, yes. And thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. And thank you at home for watching. And please remember to support the local access station in the community in which you reside. Stay safe.